go to the... Okay. Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Nour Joudah, a non-resident fellow at the Foundation for Middle East Peace. Today is Sunday, December 22nd, 2024, and I am honored to be here with Dr. Ahlam Muhtaseb to discuss her most recent project and more generally what it means to teach on Palestine in U.S. universities today. Ahlam is a professor of media studies and the graduate coordinator of the Department of Communication Studies at California State University, San Bernardino, and the Ida B. Wells Senior Data Justice Fellow at Princeton University. She's also the recipient of numerous community and research awards, including CSU-SB's Outstanding Scholarship, Research, and Creative Activities and Faculty Mentor Awards, the 2019 Rebuilding Alliance Storyteller Award, and has been recently named the 2024 Women's Support Organization's Distinguished Woman of the Year. Professor Muhtaseb co-produced and co-directed the film 1948, Creation and Catastrophe, a documentary focusing on the catastrophic consequences of 1948 for the Palestinian nation. It has been screened at over 20 film festivals and at universities and community organizations. In 2019, the film won the Jerusalem International Film Festival Special Jury Award. She's also the producer and lead researcher of the documentary 36 Seconds, Portrait of a Hate Crime, which centered the 3 young Muslims murdered in Chapel Hill in 2015 and discusses the state of hate crimes, Islamophobia, and racism in the United States. Ahlam's accomplishments are many and in fact too many to list in one go, but today we are lucky to be speaking to her on her most recent project, the Phoenix of Gaza XR. This interactive virtual reality experience captures the untold stories of Gaza's people and its transformation and provides a deep dive into the lives of those who endure and rebuild. The project itself started well before the current genocide, but as a result has taken on a new form and meaning. Ahlam and Naeem, the co-founder of the project, have been traveling to universities across the country holding exhibits with the VR experience. So first of all, welcome, Ahlam. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Dr. Joudah. It's a pleasure always to have a conversation with you.
Always good to see you. And Ahlam and I have been lucky. We've had the opportunity in the last couple of months to be in the same spaces, physical spaces and workshops. So, which is always a treat these days to get to see folks in person. So I want to start with the current project. If you can explain for us the project, tell us a little bit about how it got started and what people who go through it see and experience.
Well, this project started in 2021. So at that time, I was a faculty fellow with the X-ray lab at CSU-SB, Cal State University, San Bernardino, my school. We have an X-ray lab, and in that lab, we try to experiment with technology and the latest. And you can think of it as a free space for innovation, really. And I was working with one of my colleagues, James Strutter, and Mihaela Popescu, actually 2 of my colleagues, on another project in Shatila refugee camp. We started that one actually in 2020. We sent a 360 camera to Shatila, and we started capturing live, like in this immersive technology, so we can show an audience in the United States, for example, what it really means to live in a refugee camps. Because once you put the headsets, like the Oculus, for example, you feel like you're walking into a refugee camp, for example, and you're walking with those 2 young people. They were a cute couple actually from Shatila that by coincidence we saw their pictures on Facebook, and it was James who said, I would love to recreate those images in 360, because they did their their engagement pictures with the beautiful like clothes and the makeup. They were so cute, but with the backdrop of the refugee camp, with some of the destruction, some of the wires, etc. So that's what we were doing. And then Naeem was my student, my grad student. And I encouraged him to apply for a fellowship, with the lab. I said, it would be a great opportunity. And so we asked him to submit a proposal to get the fellowship. So he did. And it was, a creative idea, very simple one, but very powerful, because he wanted to capture Gaza and its multiplicity, not only what we always see, the death and destruction and the siege and the blockade as people without agency, right? But to show them that they have agency, they can resist in all forms, including just simply living a life, right?
Yeah.
So that was his idea, and it also started from his longing to see and touch and feel Gaza, because at that time it had been 6 years for him without being able to go back or see his family. So it
A
was
way to see home too.
Yeah, and it was a very personal, actually, narrative, but it was very powerful. And so that's how it all started. Those were originally the goals, to bring Gaza to an audience that cannot travel to Gaza using immersive technologies. Now, the challenge, of course, was to get the camera there. So that took us 6 months until we figured a way of getting the camera into Gaza. And we hired a videographer, photographer, Ahmed Hassaballah, who's out of Gaza now. Alhamdulillah, he's still alive and safe. He lost his father and members of his family, and his house was actually destroyed. And the camera survived, interestingly survived. So this is how it all started. Now, once we start, for a whole year, Ahmed, from July 2022 to July 23, was just capturing for us. Like, we have hundreds of reels and images of Gaza. And Naeem was in close touch with him. So every time he missed a place, like there was Hammam al-Samra, it was a Turkish bath house. He wanted so bad to go to it. He was never able to go and visit it. So he asked him to film it. Naeem told me he was in tears when he saw it, So we asked him to capture specific things, to capture agriculture, to capture crafts, arts, happy moments. Actually, we have a whole folder called Happy Moments. Of course, all of this happened, and we concluded the filming in July of 23 and told Ahmed, if we need anything else, we'll just get back to you, not knowing that the genocide would happen in just a few months. And I just want to mention one more thing. So when we started getting all the materials, James said, how about if we replicate Qasr al-Basha or Pasha Palace in at that time Mozilla Hubs. It's like a platform, a virtual platform. And this is when I started thinking, oh, that would be great, because we can now start imagining a liberated Gaza. Like, we can take it to the next level and start the imagination. And putting, we have those spheres inside that virtual, what now is a virtual museum, where we capture, it's like a time capsule, in those spheres of these, moments and these people that no longer exist. And if you want, later I could talk about, of course, turn and the.
I mean, I get emotional every time I hear you talk about it, because it's, especially if you have for everyone, I think, but for those of us who also have a personal tie to Gaza, or to any part of Palestine, like, it has been the space for all of us, whether you have family there or whether your family is from elsewhere in West Bank or in 48 or wherever, that we have had such limited physical access to for so long because of the siege, and even before the siege because of checkpoints and borders and so on. And it's in this moment, after the year and a half that we've had to think about where we were creatively a year and a half ago, thinking about using this project for imagining a future, and now it feels, maybe this is something you can talk about, maybe it feels a bit more of a project of preservation in some ways. And I don't know how one sort of balances that feeling out with this work, but Maybe on that point, you could speak a little to the name, Phoenix of Gaza. And I'm curious, actually. I mean, I can assume a lot of things as to the choice of the name, but whether it was chosen actually before the name was chosen before the recent genocide or after, and maybe some of the conversation you guys had around that.
No, actually, it was from day one. It was not in the original proposal, but it was Naim's idea. Because Naim said, I wanna call it the Phoenix of Gaza, because I want to show how people, like rise up and defy and, challenge. And it was a beautiful idea. I really liked it. When we started kind of like thinking about the visual elements of the project, Naim started thinking about, okay, we can have the phoenix, because the phoenix rises out of ashes. So he wanted to actually use an actual, visual representation of a phoenix. And at that time, I told him, Naim, when I listen to you, every time you talk about the project, I think of Ahmad Shtay's famous picture that he painted after 2014, I think. Gaza as a woman rising
Right.
up and,
Out of the rubble.
yeah, out of the rubble. I should have had it behind me so we can have
Well, we can put it with the video
yes,
on the
yeah.
page. Yeah.
So I told him, this is every time you talk, this is how I feel about the project. And I said, what if we actually approach Ahmad Abu Shtayeh and ask him if he would give us the rights to the image? And he said, great. He was able to actually get in touch with him, and we offered him to buy the rights. But Ahmad was amazing. He refused. He absolutely refused to be paid. Once we told him the idea, he said, not only I want to gift it to you, but I'll make a special one for your project that has the digitization, a little bit of the
Oh,
digital.
that's right, because you can tell it's been altered slightly. I just assumed you guys, so he did that for you.
No, he did that for us.
That's
He
amazing.
did it, and he said, just support my art. So I'm promoting his art now because I keep on buying gifts from gallery, online. So that's the story of the idea of the Phoenix of Gaza. It was before, but now I think it's more than ever still very important part of the conceptualization.
Yeah.
So let me tell you this journey. So yes, we never expected that when we were trying to run away from death and destruction, from that narrative, to avoid it, to show agency, to show beautiful life, how amazing people in Gaza are. We were forced violently,
Yeah.
forced to go back to a place where we didn't want to actually talk about. And that happens to a lot of us Palestinian scholars, thinkers, intellectuals, writers. No matter how much we want to write about something, we are always brought back to the violent realities of Palestine. I remember, I told some of my professors, like, I would be right every time I had an important paper when I was a grad student. And even now, every time I had a deadline, we have a horrifying event happening in Palestine, and we have to put all of our resources towards that. And this was another example, but 100 times worse, right? And the devastating part was first thinking, why us? Why did we do it? Like you kind of feel very guilty, honestly. Like that, I think the first thing that hit me was the guilt. Like, why did I do that? Like how, like as if
The project, you mean, or?
Yeah, the project itself. It was very surreal at that time. Like, what on earth is this? Like, what is happening? And every time Naim would come and say, call me every day and say, oh my God, Omari Mosque gone, then
All these places that you had filmed.
like الجندي المجهول, the unknown soldier square, they destroyed it, they razed it.
Yeah.
Khayam al-Shati, that was one of the very first places they raised, and we had one of the most amazing videos of a 12-year-old Muhammad board skating, and we gave him the camera and he's just capturing.
Oh, he just took the skateboard through the streets.
Yeah, and it's one of the most beautiful videos, and now it's the most painful ones. For me, that's the most painful one. I keep thinking of Muhammad all the time. Like, I wish we asked him his last name, about his last name.
So you could
If
find
there
him.
was a way to track him down to know what, that's always haunting me. And so for 3 months, we couldn't do anything. We stopped totally. We were supposed actually to launch in October, the project. And it was a very sad time. It was, at one point, I think James was the one who helped us say, guys, people have to see this. This is the time to release it. Guys, we have to show people what had been destroyed. People have to see those people up close, as if you are sitting with them and think, oh my God, these people are gone. And for me, it started taking another shape, honestly, which is people have to walk into us. I don't care about empathy, because they keep on talking about empathy machine. And I don't want empathy from people. This is horrifying. I want people to feel, I did that. My money in this country, I want them to walk into these spaces and say, oh my God, what have we done? We did that. This is my responsibility. How can I fix that? To actually to hold people accountable in a very intimate way. Like, because people ask me about the empathy all the time. I was like, anyway, I don't want to use expletive on your but you know what I have.
I don't think you'd be the first person, but I understand.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is way beyond empathy. This is us conducting genocide, and I want you to see what
and
you
beyond complicity, it's an active, active participation, engagement.
This is our doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to actually kind of respond to that question at Yale when we did the keynote speech, because I was asked that question and I said, like, probably I won't be invited again, but who cares? And I had to link it, of course, to how I feel about also charity, because that's another word. I think it's a good word, and I have so much to say about that. But anyway, so that's how it kind of like veered into a new direction, and then it became also a very clear evidence of genocide. That's Amnesty International were actually one of the first people to contact us to see.
So the recent report that came out, they also pulled from.
They did not. It's a long story, but eventually, when we asked them for a formal letter explaining exactly how they use it, and to like use it with our cooperation, we didn't hear from them, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think at that point, I can't trust how people are going to use the material. It's like, it's for us now, we are just the guardians. We don't own the material. That's not ours. But just guardians for this material. You know what I mean?
I mean, there's a sense of responsibility of how you deal with this incredible archive of footage.
Yeah, but we were in touch with ICJ and trying to reach ICC. So anyone has any leads, because as actually the employee from Amnesty International explained, because I asked her, like, why would it be very important to get hold of this material? She said, oh, are you kidding me? When the Israelis say Al-Umari Mosque was used for tunnels and for you captured everything in 360. Usually we look at aerial images and aerial footage. We rarely have that clarity of an image where you can actually walk around and look everywhere.
That makes sense. I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, you talked a lot about, obviously, you were supposed to launch in October. There was a very necessary delay to kind of regroup and recalibrate, reground yourselves as individuals, your colleague who encouraged you to sort of keep going with the project. In terms of how it's changed since October 2023, I wanna get to kind of how people are reacting to the footage as you take it to places and what are kind of the reactions you're seeing. But before that, I'm curious, has there been new footage included since October? And kind of what is the state of that now?
That's a good question. And I could maybe address also the trajectory of the change in trajectory again one more time, and how the Phoenix of Gaza is still, a central part of this. So we managed to pull the camera out of the rubble, believe it or not, twice. The camera was hit twice and survived with a scratch. I mean, poor camera has a scratch. It's amazing. I mean, it's just, 360-degree cameras are very small, by the way. People see the impact, they think, oh, it's a huge machine. It's literally like smaller than a cell phone. Okay. So yeah, so it was in its package, so it was protected and it survived actually. Yeah, you put it on a tripod or you hold it and it captures everything around you basically. So then the challenge, the camera. So Ahmed Hasabullah he lived in North Gaza. He lived in Gaza City actually. So the challenge was to find someone from North Gaza or from those areas to actually be our filmmaker. Eventually found someone, alhamdulillah. So someone who's very good, who knows the area very well. Actually, for some time we tried to protect his identity, but he told us he's okay to be known because he's a well-known also journalist. He's a freelance journalist, and his name is Yahya. I'm gonna say his first name is Yahya.
Okay.
We are always concerned for his safety because
especially these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is he still in the north? Do you know?
Yes, he is. And we tell him, please, don't ever like take any risky moves or do.
Yeah, the footage isn't worth your life.
Exactly. So Allah yahmi, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So yes, so that's what we have been doing. So he has been sending us the aftermath, especially for the historical monuments and for universities. So Gaza University, Al Azhar. So so that's what we have been adding. But on top of that, there are elements of the project that made us also think we can't just be pushed by the Israelis always to react to their violence. We have to find a way out of that mindset. And this is a project in progress, like.
Yeah, of course.
So now we are focused on the issue of rebuilding. We will rebuild, I'm sure, inshallah, that we will rebuild. It's gonna happen. And I would love for us now to utilize technologies that had been used mainly in the context of Palestine for killing and maiming and destroying. I mean, think of the drones, think of the AIs. We want to reclaim that in a defiant way and try to rebuild in virtual spaces, which we have started actually. That's the next stage. So so that's what we have been doing. So when we met actually in Yale, those exhibitions have amazing impact. You asked me about how people react.
People are reacting,
in different ways. So yeah, people who feel helpless actually and devastated and crushed. Most people cry. Most people, it's very rare to see someone do the exhibition without actually feeling the emotional impact. We interviewed many people and it works at the level of, oh my God, like my country is doing this, or listen, we are doing that. But there are, of course, other people who see things differently. And that was amazing doing the exhibition because you meet those people who give you inspiration. So I met this young doctoral student at Yale from the School of Architecture. And he's Palestinian German.
Okay.
And this is what he did. His name is Tony. He's originally, I think, from Beit Sahur, Beit Lahem. He recreated the village on which side the University of Tel Aviv sits.
Right.
From just images and old images, literally just did extensive research, found as many as he could, and recreated it in virtual spaces. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what we are trying to do. We did part of it, but to have someone, but none of our team members, and we have a lot of technicians actually, like Ethan, he does a lot of those buildings. We have JC who does 3D modeling. So I'm not, usually I avoid speaking about the technical aspects of it because it confuses people. But you have an architect who actually did this kind of work.
Yeah.
I told him, Tony, please, when you finish your exams, he was doing his finals, we have to speak about this. And then I met with, at Princeton, my friend, Suhail Dahdal, who is one of the most amazing, most creative people in terms of retooling technology for the cause. He's the person, people don't know about him, unfortunately, in the United States. He teaches at the American University of Sharqa. I met him at a conference at the American University of Beirut and was mesmerized by his work. He's the first person to do a film on a Nakba in a VR. First VR, film. And not only this, but his process was unbelievable. Like, this is someone who for years went to Palestine every time he had a research scholarship, grant, captured, trained young Palestinians to interview their elders. He did workshops, gave them cameras, collected those, took them back to the school, hired students to recreate the images. It's like a long process, and I thought the process was beautiful, amazing work. Yeah. Anyway, so now he joined our team to help us in the recreation. So his latest project, that's why I wanted him to be part of this, was with one of his friends using volumetric cameras and other technologies that probably most of you haven't heard of. Actually, and drones.
Right.
That's why I love about those kinds of projects, is reclaiming technology from what they are doing to us into something beautiful, something positive. They captured all of Lifta's village, like even al-Hitan, the walls, the alleys inside the houses that are still standing.
Right.
And I think they collected 70,000 images.
Wow.
In total. And now they are recreating the whole village. So if the Israelis end up demolishing it, because that's what they are talking about, it's not the only few villages that were left standing. Yeah. It was not taken by the Israelis, and it was not demolished. It's a unique case. Yeah. I think because it was so beautiful, it was left like a natural museum. Yeah. But there are
also partly because it was also partly architecturally, it's also partly because it was all stone. So when you look at our village, for example, that was destroyed, what most people don't talk about often when we talk about depopulated and destroyed villages is how many of the villages the homes were not stone yet. They were actually just sort of, a lot of the villages, especially on the Sahel, on the coast, were just starting to move from being clay homes into cement and stone homes. And so, for example, in Isdoud, in our village, there are a few remaining structures, but it's not any of the homes. It's the mosque, it's the school, it's a couple of the newer homes that were built in the late 40s,
harder to demolish.
But the rest of the homes, the heart of the village, were very easy to demolish, right? But yeah.
But now there are talks about demolishing these, so it's part of the process of erasure. So we thought that this is the kind of work now. This is the trajectory. This is the change in direction. And also, as I said, to snap out of what they force us to be in. Force us to think. They try to enforce a certain mindset, on us. And we're trying to resist that, being put in that mold. So I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did
I'm
absolutely.
drifted a little bit to talking about other people's work, but I love to highlight, amazing Palestinian
No,
scholars.
I think it's because so much of what we do is not only collaborative, but when you're doing work that speaks to the future of a community, that none of that can be solitary work to begin with. That it's counterintuitive, it's counterproductive. And some of what you're talking about reminds me so much of my own research on like the village reconstruction competition, Salman Abu Sitta and Palestine Land Society's reconstruction competition, looking at those designs of young Palestinian architecture students, right? And them going back in and actually like the entire project is what it means to rebuild all of these depopulated and destroyed villages, and redesigning them from the ground up and taking into account things like the number of refugees that would come back, the kinds of facilities you would need, how many descendants, where the refugees are coming from, and how that may impact the kind of life that they would lead in the village itself. Like there's so many aspects to what any version of a liberated future entails for a population such as Palestinians that has such a high diaspora and exile community, right? And so I think it's always so important for all of us to be in communication with each other and highlight these different projects because all of these projects feed into the larger conversation.
Exactly. And I'm a little bit older than you guys. So for me to see you and see all the amazing young generation and all the work and knowledge production and knowledge challenge and decolonizing all forms of knowledge give me a great sense of euphoria. That we're winning, that they can defeat us. Eventually, we are gonna liberate Palestine, inshallah. So it's amazing when I see, younger generation actually taking the work to the next level. So
Hey, we all stand on each other's shoulders, right? As my dad says. But one of the things you brought up, which I think is so important, um, in the way that you address this group at Yale that you were speaking to is okay, so moving beyond a question of empathy, moving to a question of responsibility. And along those lines, I'm someone that also works in questions of data and social justice and the intersection between them. And one of the things that comes up a lot for all of us, especially with things like new technologies that you mentioned and what it means to reclaim them, whether it's virtual reality or drones, et cetera, is how do we, in moments where you are invited to have these exhibitions or to show projects, how do we present and use them without finding ourselves encouraging, right, voyeurism and moving beyond empathy? How do we do that? And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how you and Naeem try to ground the participants in what they're viewing, whether it's if they happen to be at a lecture or if it's in maybe how the exhibition is structured itself, or if there's an introduction or anything like that.
well, that's an excellent question. And to be honest with you, it's very important because that's exactly what we were trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah.
We were trying to avoid, like, we were sick of this process of always, putting Palestinians as exhibition subjects,
Mm-hmm.
mostly without, as I said, agency and as victims. We were trying to get out of that, and we were trying to resist and show the beautiful multiplicity of life in Gaza, the vibrancy, how people are very creative. We had like beautiful images of the beach, for example, the Suq al-Dahab gold market. But the problem is when we showed initially before October 7, we did few, like very limited kind of viewing of these materials. And I remember Naeem called me and said, we have probably to capture some of the destruction in Gaza, because when I show it to my students, they think, oh, they live life like us. So it was problematic also in terms of just showing that. We had kind of like to make it more nuanced, right? Because people in the United States, they don't know. And so it was an intricate approach, and an evolving one. We keep on thinking about it and changing it. At one point,
balancing agency and victimhood.
Exactly, because it exists. You have to show them that those people, those beautiful places, those people are making life, and we showed like crafts and arts, but they also deal with this, and they rise out of this. So we wanted to make it like a full circle. And at one point, Naeem saw the beautiful Ahmad captured for us, Ahmad Hasaballah, the beautiful what do you call them, murals and street art, right, and graffiti, and some of these were absolutely gorgeous, and you see them actually in our exhibition. So he asked Ahmad to do special, segments on artists in Gaza. We captured, I think, 16 of them. We filmed their art. We filmed them actually painting and doing workshops, and mainly in their houses or in small workshops they had. And that was also one way of allowing those artists to have their art exhibited outside of the United States. Outside of Gaza, like in the United States or in Europe. And now you can actually, we created, part of the exhibition is we created posters for them with QR codes where we put those in memento. So people who can't, for example, do the exhibition because they get motion sickness or emotional, they could do that instead, and at least see those on their cell phones. So that again, it's not an easy, straightforward answer. We still grapple with this. We still struggle with it. How can we avoid voyeurism when we want to still show people what is happening?
Right.
Show people what used to be and is no longer, right? It was weird because part of it we didn't think we would be capturing the past, right? You never think, oh, I'm doing this project and I'm capturing the past. That's never a mindset of anyone doing this kind of work.
Right.
So this is not only, honestly, it's not only this project. It's everything we do. I mean, think about it. It hit me a few years ago when I was teaching a grad class in qualitative research methods, and we take, a decolonial approach to research methods. We, emphasize the importance of decolonization. We do naturalistic approaches to research using ethnographic work, etc. And so part of it, of course, is me always talking about the impact of science and scholarship being tools in the hands of colonial and imperialist projects, right? And their impact on people. So I used to show, videos of certain impacts, like of eugenics on indigenous populations or Black people, etc. Right. And I had a Black student in class once who said something that really hit me hard. And she said she was not comfortable with what I was showing. And she said, Dr. Muhtaseb, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm tired of being the exhibition. Something like this. I mean, not exactly the words.
But that sentiment.
Yeah, but like, playing my pain over and over. Sometimes I just want to sit in class and pretend I'm one of those students who doesn't come with a historical package, And that hit me hard. And from that made me also think even more and more about the issue of voyeurism. And it comes up a lot in a lot of things we do, right?
Yeah.
Even when you write, I mean, it could be also potentially, it's not the similar gaze as in technology, right? Because of the visual element. And with immersive technologies, even more. because you walk sometimes into one of these spheres and you are face to face with someone who might be no longer existing in Gaza.
Yeah.
And that was very painful for me. I mean, you sometimes walk into these and there is a close-up with someone knitting. So we have a workshop of women actually knitting.
Selling falafel in the street, selling, I've seen some of the kinds of preview, shots that you have on the website and so on. Just walking through a market, walking through a neighborhood, like God knows how many of those.
And when you put the headsets on, you are transformed. You actually feel like you are walking with those people, right? But you are alive and you are okay and you are just floating around into a time capsule, basically. So again, I don't know. I mean, part of me, sometimes I go to those exhibitions, I have a very, very bad, sad feeling. And I tell that to Naeem all the time. I don't know if I want to do this again. I told him several times. Sometimes the audience also and the setting, makes a difference.
Depends, yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But that's a very.
How many have you done so far?
I haven't counted them.
I mean, not an exact number.
The first two we did was at my school. We did huge, full-fledged, events over 2 days. We had like big hall. We had 25 sets. We had 15 technicians, all around. Like we really did like superb one. And then we did, Naeem did one at, CU Boulder. Gosh, we did a lot of those. He did one also in the black box. That's another way of exhibition. And in November, he did one.
Can you explain what that is for folks listening who might not be?
Yes, black box is 3D theater, basically.
Okay.
So you have projections. You're literally in a box. That's what they call it, black box. Like a room with the projection on all walls, basically. So it's an imitation of the 3D feeling that you get from putting on a headset without putting the headset on. And it could be useful for a couple of reasons, including the fact that it's easier to do. You don't have to have the headsets and the technology. The technical aspects drives you nuts sometimes. It takes away from it. People don't know how much work goes into making. It's a lot of work. Easier way actually projection, and you can have more people. And we also did the planetarium. CU Boulder, they have a beautiful plan, and that was a fantastic one where Naeem actually did that one, and he narrated over what they see, and it's easier because you do it in 1 hour to 200. I think he had 200, 250 people all at once.
So that's what I wanted to ask. I mean, I can imagine that also one of the major differences of headset to a group setting, it's like seeing a film versus seeing a play, right? But I mean, even though you're technically in a room with other people in a film, there's something about the interaction when you're at a play, right? Like the theater versus film or TV. And I can picture Naeem in the room. That's, I think for me is like a significant thing to picture Naeem in the room talking about things and have everyone looking at the same image at the same time. And that the person next to you who was potentially a friend or a classmate or so on is also viewing this, as opposed to the individual experience of the VR. And I mean, for me, it strikes a lot of questions, and I wonder, maybe you don't, and it's okay if you don't have an answer for this, but I wonder if you lean towards one more than the other.
I love how you did that analogy and that high level of thinking. For us, it was more practicality, I'll be honest. It's logistical.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You see, when we work, you remind me of working with Roha Benjamin at Princeton, because Roha is very creative and imaginative, and that's
a high compliment.
That's what she writes about, right? And just working with her and her questions to us usually, how we want to do this, and she put so much work into that event. I told people I think it's gonna be the best event I've ever attended and the best event that could ever be done, for my work, as an exhibition of our work. Because she went out of her way to make that event. It was just
which I heard went
historical, phenomenal event. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard it went amazingly by all accounts.
But when we were organizing with her, yeah, we noticed that, oh my God, because and I told her that we're always pushed into the crunch of the logistical aspects because they are complicated. Sending the files, downloading the files, making sure they work, use Manage XR, use all these technological parts that you don't even see and you don't know about.
Yeah.
To perfect the experience for the audience, detach us from the aesthetic, intellectual, poetic part of the project.
I mean, I imagine for me, it makes complete sense, right? That would happen in the same way that if you're working, I mean, it doesn't matter how amazing, I remember I used to work at an academic journal. It doesn't matter how amazing every piece in an issue is, how creative, how innovative, how you get so bogged down in the editing and fixing the proofs and making sure that the indentations are correct and you lose complete sight of the fact that you've created this incredible issue with phenomenal work inside sometimes. And I feel like that's
I'm doing
more true for technical
doing a
projects.
special issue now on
Yeah. No, but this is more true even
as
so
an editor.
technical projects, right? And because we've been conditioned to think about data and technology in particular ways, but they do have this incredible like affect, and we have very significant ways in which we digest this material, as is proven by our personal reactions to the stories, as people's reactions to Phoenix of Gaza, but also, I mean, anything, the amount of social media that we've all absorbed over the last year and a half in particular. And so, yeah, I absolutely, hearing you talk about it, the first thing that comes to my mind is I imagine quite a different experience from a headset to being in a room together.
Unfortunately, I was not part of that. I wanted to fly to Boulder, but I was at Cal Poly Humboldt for a whole week, and then I was supposed to go to
No, busy, but yeah, no, it's just
I
something.
didn't go, but Naeem told me it was phenomenal. But also, we don't have planetarium everywhere.
No, of course.
Now that's the first question we ask. Like, do you have
one?
Black box or planetarium?
Well, and what I've learned is that also recently is that not all planetariums, some of them on campuses are also older and they haven't updated their technology, and so they don't have the capacity to actually do 360 footage. So that's, I mean, there are all kinds
That's
of
exactly happening now with UCI. So that's our next two exhibitions are going to be UCR and UCI. University of California, Riverside, for those who don't know, and University of California, Irvine. So the Irvine professor, who's Professor Ghada Murad, she's organizing this. We told her about the planetarium, and we said there is one close to you, which is Orange County Community College, I think. And she was in contact with them, and they went bananas. Like they loved the idea. They got very excited. But guess what? They are gonna close the planetarium on the 27th of January for 3 weeks to fix it, to do repairs. And that's if they open it after 2 weeks. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
Now, we have been, me and her, thinking, should we do it at Irvine by itself and then doing the planetarium on a different time?
Later, yeah.
Of them and do them at the same time. So you are pushed all the time to forget about the imaginative aspect, the creative one, and think about the logistical parts. Those are driving us crazy. And we hired people to help us, but still, because now we get funding, thank goodness. But still, we are the decision maker in a lot of these aspects. But hopefully with the new stage, that's what I told Naeem. I said we have to slow down. After actually Yale and Princeton, we got 100, like in
invitations.
hours. 100.
I mean, because you've been we kind of got off track a bit. Started talking about like how many of these you've done, and not to have an exact number, but you've done
Yeah, we did Salt
quite a
Lake.
few at this point.
Yeah,
So Colorado, you were on the East Coast for a while, did several. You have
we
more
did
coming up
even
this
Salt Lake,
winter.
yeah, Salt Lake Community College. We did the University of Redlands here in California,
Yeah.
which is a private school. We did Yale and Princeton, and now we have a line, and we're going to be MIT together.
Yeah, we'll be at the MIT Symposium.
It was fun to be with Nour in space. And there is Harvard, and there is Amherst.
And I'm gonna get you to UCLA one way or another.
Yeah.
So no, I mean,
I told Naomi have to slow down though.
Yeah.
I can't. I can't.
No, because I think I mean the thing is I know both of you well enough to know that you are so concerned with these core questions, and it is really difficult with technological projects and with data and really the way that sort of data justice projects and the amount of funding that's now also being thrown at data justice projects in higher education. We get so bogged down in the logistics sometimes that we are forced, and based on time constraints and a number of things, to actually not spend the time that we wish we could spend on the core questions of how do we create the best scenario to get us to the impact that we want, right? And because I think the assumption so often with technology and with media production is all you have to do is throw it at people. And that's never the case, right? You have to have framing, you have to have explanation, you do have to think about things like the environment you're presenting it in. And to your point, you know, who you're giving footage to and for what purpose, because there's a responsibility. So, you know, I think these are questions that come up for researchers of every kind, and we just see it amplified so much more when we work with technology.
Yeah, but that's not the first time I struggled with that. Remember, I went into filmmaking. I'm not, of
course.
People say I'm a filmmaker, I laugh because I was not even trained as a filmmaker, right? I was trained as a social scientist, believe it or not, like in the very traditional positivistic aspect. Like epistemologically, ontologically, very social science approach. That's how I was trained. And it was a journey for me really to transform and change and evolve. And I'm still like, anyone who tells you I'm in a space where I know what I'm doing are lying. And you should really even suspect their scholarship. It's you can never reach a point where you've done it, you figured it out, right? You keep on figuring that out.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of being in scholarship, in research, in knowledge production. But I reached a point where I was doing a lot of critique of media representation of us, right? Whether it's Palestinians or Muslims in general or Arabs, especially women. Of course, I had a focus on that, and I teach a class on Muslim women in media and society. But then I reached a point, of course, there were a lot of factors that helped push me to that point. It wasn't like I woke up one day and said, oh, wait a second, I could actually produce media instead of critiquing them. It was really multiple factors. For example, I volunteered for, here there was a great initiative in San Diego called Alternate Focus. It was like an alternative TV station to produce materials on the so-called Middle East, right? I learned about it, and I got to meet the people, and I volunteered. And my mentor at that time, when I was young and beautiful, was someone from Jewish Voice for Peace, currently at SWE. And he was the one who pushed me to rethink my approach. Like he said, I go with you guys to everything you do at Al Auda. At that time, I was very active with Al Auda. We put those amazing lectures. But I feel like you keep on like preaching to the choir, and we
Mhm.
know this. How can you get it out to an audience that doesn't know? So that was the challenge. And he started saying we have to produce like media. We have to
Right.
take university outside, intellectual production outside of the university, right?
Yeah, public engagement work.
Yeah, public education, kind of these ideas. And he was the one who encouraged me when I wanted to go and do my, so that's another thing, is that in academia, like we are defined by a book, right? Book publishing. And he was, and that's what I was doing. I was going to the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon mainly, and in Syria, and doing, my ethnography on narrative, cognitive narratology, the role of narratives in creating, collective trauma among Palestinian refugees and collective identity, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. And he was like, take a camera with you. That's
Yeah.
what all this stuff. Take a camera. He did some basic training because I was volunteer with them.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let me apply for a grant. I got a grant. I bought a camera. I got like $5,000. Got a camera. He trained me. Went with me actually to shop, specific things. Anyway, that's how I started. Like, wow, I'm changing direction. I'm totally changing direction.
Yeah.
I don't regret it at all. I think, with 1948 Creation Catastrophe, my first film. Actually, it's my second film. I did a first film before with that same group, Minarets in Temecula, but nobody knows about film. That was a small scale, like little film. Anyway, it was about, when they tried to, it was Ground Zero Mosque and all these controversies. So we did one and focused on the Temecula community because I live there, where we have some of the best white supremacists there,
Ah!
like the finest in the country.
Oh God.
It's disgusting. Anyway, I drifted, but with 1948 Creation Catastrophe, my second film, which took actually 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
Similar conversations, similar, thinking, oh my goodness, like the amount of decision making you do in making a film is crazy. And
Yeah.
people think, oh, when you see those like stereotypical images in Hollywood, for example, some of my students literally think, oh, they didn't mean it. They don't know better, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's unintentional.
No, it's all intentional. I know now that part. I know it very well.
Yeah.
You grapple with, of course, the ethics and ethical questions and considerations, and the huge responsibility of representing people also. It's not easy, even if I'm Palestinian.
There is a
I
moment,
yeah.
there's a moment that we talk about, I have to, as geographer, we're obsessed with maps. I mean, there is a moment that we talk about also always, right, when you go from looking at the product to being a part of the creation, your perspective changes, and not in sort of a neoliberal sense of, oh, I understand what someone else thinks, but like you really have a comprehension for what goes into the
Yeah.
creation and the amount of potential manipulation that is present, right? So
You can say with full mouth, with full confidence, I've done this, and I know don't
right,
tell me this is coincidence. Don't tell me this is, innocent mistakes. Don't tell me this is not, there is a process, and especially with editing,
mm-hmm.
because you could do a lot of crazy things. I mean, we interviewed 100 people, but we used only 33 interviews, right?
Of course.
That's part of the decision-making process. Why did we decide these are the people who are going to be, and there are like 100 different factors, of course. But the editing process is the one that shows you all that intentionality,
Yeah.
right?
And the curation, you think about museum curation, and
Yes.
why things are placed the way they are, what's cut, yeah, I mean, all of these things come into play. And this is why you have a career in media critique.
Yeah.
But and because there is so much to it, but to your point, I think there is some uh real richness in what it means to be whether you're an academic or whether you're a journalist or a student, to be someone who understands not only how to read it and critique it and understand it, but also create it. Because it does have this impact. I wanna ask you one last question before we go. It's kind of a big one, but we can take it in whatever direction you like. And just because it has been, I mean, there are no amount of words, I think, to describe what this last year and a half has been for, especially for those of us on university campuses here in the US. And as someone who has been teaching and working on Palestine in the United States for decades now, I want to get your perspective on what you think are some of the biggest changes that you've seen, not necessarily just in the last year, but over your career of teaching Palestine in the US. And those can be positive changes, they can be negative changes. But just kind of your perspective on what you've seen change the most and why you think that is.
Well, I'm optimistic about that question in the sense of there has been a huge paradigm shift in knowledge production, in awareness, in particular in academia. So the academia I came into the United States in 1998 on a Fulbright scholarship. Actually, my intention was to stay only 1 year in America. That culture, when I first came, and of course I came from out of the first Intifada, and I was shot actually in the first Intifada when I was 16 years old. So my perspective was, of course, like very, very different, and I was also, I didn't mind taking risks, right? The culture was very repressive. And people around you keep on warning you, you have to be careful, you have to be careful. So how, my husband, who we were going, this is where we met in college when I came to the United States, how he lost his what is it called, fellowship because of an exhibition we did, a photo exhibition in the library of the University of Memphis in Tennessee. We were literally on the first pages of the main newspaper in the whole area, the Commercial Appeal, for daring actually to do an exhibition about, it was about the first Intifada, by the way. Anyway, so looking now at how much has changed, it's amazing. It's academia, now you can say it's discourse on Palestine is so normalized also in a very positive way, right? You walk into any space now and it's okay to say Palestine, to say genocide, all these words. Of course, there are two problems here. The first one is the way that the administration dealt with our freedom of expression and freedom of speech, especially with the encampments, right? So the institutions became more radical in fighting us, in the other direction. So you have this huge positive change, but then you have the pushback. And I think that's part and parcel of something bigger, which is the neoliberal model of academia that has been, really taking over academia in the last at least 15, 20 years. I mean, slowly to where I don't recognize my university anymore because of the number of MPPs. They are cutting our salaries. They are, taking away our class releases, our professional development money. There is no money for anything intellectual anymore. But at the same time, they keep hiring those middle management and higher management positions. They create new positions. And I'm like, when we go to these meetings, how can you do that when you create position, for example, for recruitment, and we have the lowest, you created all these apparatus for recruitment, right, of students and enrollment and increasing enrollment, and we are at the historical lowest enrollment in our university. So that's not working, So anyway, we push back. But part of that that transformation of the university, of course, made it easier to crack down on student movement, student uprising, on faculty, for the same reason, you know. So I think it's very important when we discuss this, we always tell our allies, our supporters, be careful because this is impacting us all. It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Right? It's all interconnected. Because now the university functions like a company, even public universities like mine, it becomes easier actually to try to take away our rights. But of course, we keep on pushing back. But the good news is also it's beyond just academia, it's beyond the university. When you have now a majority of Americans who actually not only want ceasefire, but they want to stop, you know, military aid to Israel.
Right.
That would have been a crazy idea, let's say 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. That would have been a crazy idea. Now, the challenge for us is how can we transform that into actual policy? That's what we failed at. I think we succeeded at the level of our mission, which is to educate, right? We're educators at the end of the day. But of course, as Palestinians, we can't say that's what I have to do. Now I'm thinking, no, there must be something more we can do. And that's why I have been telling everyone, we have to be more involved in the political process, because it means saving people's lives. It means ending the genocide. Even if we succeed, at least, if we don't succeed, at least we say we tried. I'm going to be honest with you. You wouldn't have heard me saying this 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But now I'm like, heck, you know, I'm going to do way more than I'm doing at academia. I'm taking it beyond. I actually put my name up for the Central Committee of the Democratic Party last year. I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I learned, you know.
Yeah.
If you get a PhD and do all this research, you can definitely learn the process. But that's what I had been saying. That's what we should push for more change.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, at least, you know, we can end on a positive note and say that at least we succeeded in creating this huge awareness, beautiful, you know, manifestation of solidarity with the Palestinian people, where people took it to the extreme, you know, when students who have no connection whatsoever decide it's okay. And I was, you know, up close with the students at UCSB. It's okay. I'm gonna risk being arrested and maybe losing my academic future, because I will one day remember that I did something simple to stop the genocide. I was not,
I didn't just stand by and let it happen.
I was not a bystander. So when you see those students, it gives us hope. Let's end on a hopeful note.
I think that's a great way to end. Ahlam, thank you so much for joining me. We will talk soon again, I'm sure, and I'm excited to see the project up close at MIT in a couple of months, and hopefully we'll get you out here to LA soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahlam.